In the world of Warhammer 40k, the ability of one single individual to change the entire course of history is quite the common occurrence. A little too much, some might say, but it always makes for an excellent story, and the Space Marines are often quite familiar with this role. But have you ever heard about the single Space Marine that foiled the plans of an entire Cabal? Not only ruining decades of the foul Xenos plotting, but also saving an entire Imperial area of space from the devastation of several Orc wars. Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, is none other than Brother Sergeant Priad of the Iron Snakes chapter. And this is his and his vaunted chapter's story. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get cracking on with today's video. So before I can begin talking about Brother Priad and his stories in the Reef Stars, let's first talk about the Iron Snakes. A very unique but technically codex compliant chapter, but not really. Now, what do I mean by that? The Iron Snakes are a second founding Ultramarine successor chapter, founded by a general known as Saur Damocles, who was a captain in the Ultramarine 6 Company from Horus Heresy, and thus the Ultramarine 6 Company insignia would go on to form the chapter insignia of the Iron Snakes. Now, these are technically a Codex compliant chapter in that they have 1,000 Marines, but they are actually a Codex deviant chapter in how they organize themselves. You see, these guys are not organized into companies. There is no 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, all the way up to the Scout. There is none of that. Instead, they are organized into 10-man strong squads. Most of these are tactical squads, though it's believed that if the need arises, a squad can be armed individually as either a tactical, an assault, or a devastator. Though this is never confirmed and is just hearsay, to be frank. Because whenever we see them, they're always seen as a tactical squad. Most notably, all of the information that we're going to be drawing from comes from the Brothers of the Snake book as a mainline source, as that is their prime positioned appearance and what everyone knows them for. You see, prominent figures in the 6th Company were a rather important element, with squad leaders being a very permanent feature. Therefore, the Iron Snakes took that. Each squad is named after its original founding squad member, with the most notable being Damocles, named after the chapter master himself. Within the Iron Snakes chapter, there are so-called 5 notable squads, that being Scipio, Parthus, Vey, Thebes, and Damocles. These are essentially the elite 1st Company, if you will, though notably they're now organized into a company and there's only 5 of them, which means only 50 battle brothers. These notables are the preeminent elites of the chapter, and thus only the greatest petitioners get to join their ranks. Speaking of a petitioner, since there is no 10th Scout Company, how do the Iron Snakes function when it comes to recruiting? Well, kind of like the Black Templars in that case. Individual recruits, known as petitioners, will join and serve individual battle brothers or squads, and during this time they will continue as these so-called aides, until an opening in a squad presents itself. At that point, the petitioner must fight a fellow battle brother in single combat, and if he proves his worth, he is then allowed to be inducted into the squad proper as a fully fledged battle brother. In regards to the chapter armory, they seem to possess everything that a normal chapter does, including land speeders, dreadnoughts, as well as tanks, though these are doled out as per need basis. Another notable quirk about the Iron Snakes is that they have an unusually high number of apothecaries, with the notable squads having a single apothecary each, and with apothecaries being common attachments to individual squads, meaning that in theory there could be one apothecary for each squad, though this is highly unlikely and never confirmed, but it would be pretty cool. Speaking of the tactical squads, however, they have shown a love for special weapons. Particularly, they are armed with 2, a plasma as well as a flamer, which makes sense. Plasma is excellent against anti-armor and hard targets, and a flamer will turn anything that skitters and scurries into molten slag. But then that begs the question, why are they organized like this? Why are they organized into squads of 10 men rather than full-on companies? Why do they possess no greater organization than that? There's essentially the chapter and then the squads. And that's because of the area of space which they protect. They protect an area of space known as the Reef Stars. The Reef Stars, for one reason or another, are incredibly prone to piratical raids, most notably due to their geography, or spaceography rather. And they've become a favorite hunting grounds of one particular brand of dastardly Xenos bastard, that being the Dark Eldar, or as the Iron Snakes know them, the Primals. And then now you know why they're divided into squads. With the nature of Dark Eldar, they're everywhere, zipping, zapping around, moving as raiding forces. Very, very, very rarely do they coalesce as one giant strike group. Instead, you're more likely to have a billion all over the show causing havoc on many different assortment of planets. And in that case, having one giant company to thunder smash them into the dirt ain't good if by doing so, you got 9 other planets getting wasted. So, divide that squad into 10 different man teams. and have them individually go forward and crush the Xenos. Indeed, in some cases the Iron Snakes can be stretched so thin that it oftentimes is quite common for them to send but a singular battle brother to a planet to solve an issue. This is by far a worst case scenario, but rather something that's often quite planned. Which makes sense. The Space Marine is worth a couple dozen knife years. Now I have a theory about this. You see, these are his second founding successor chapter, and in the aftermath of the Great Crusade and the Great Scouring, the Imperium was in all types of trouble. It was very broken and very vulnerable. So I could imagine Damocles and the remnants of Six Company being created and forming this brand new chapter. And then from there, they are given the Reef Stars to guard. The thing is though, because there's so many practical raiders, they have to change the way they're structured. And thus, it comes to this squad-based system instead, rather than a company-based system. Which means that you have many different independent elements going there and from, being able to combat the foe and then quickly respond. Indeed, it's believed that oftentimes you have individual squads that are just out on patrol, meaning that they are far able to respond to a threat than normal. Though again, a lot of that more finer details is largely unknown to us. But what if the Iron Snakes need to fight in more than 10-man squads, I hear you saying? Well, that's no problem. We see that they're able to coalesce into massive numbers of Astartes and fight just as regular companies. In fact, the Iron Snakes may be one of the most effective Space Marine units that there are. Because of their independent nature, it means that the average battle brother has to pull his weight far more often than usual, and the fact that they're able to work and combine together into large formations mean that they haven't lost their tactical codex edge. All in all, they're quite a dangerous force. They also look pretty cool, as them being described as somewhat hoplite-like, with combat shields as well as combat spears being standard issue, a so-called sea lance, which is a native weapon of their homeworld, the ocean world of Ithaca. Fun fact, one of the many trials of the Iron Snakes is for them to kill a great sea worm, aka sea serpent. And this is like a sea dragon, which is pretty fucking epic. They also have a lot of Greco-hoplite themings, particularly Athenian theming. And we consider that, Ultramarine, Greco-Roman, it makes sense. Also, the idea of an Ultramarine phalanx just makes me hard. So whenever I see that, I'm gonna latch onto that son of a bitch and I ain't gonna let go, like a goddamn bulldog named Princess. But that's the Iron Snakes. A pretty fucking cool successor chapter, and honestly one of my favorites. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, was just the start of soup. Let's now get into the meat and potatoes of this video, the story of Brother Priad, and how his actions as one singular Marine would lead on to the course of a chain of events decades in the making, that would eventually follow a Dark Eldar Kabal's entire plan to have an area of Imperial space overwhelmed by not just one, but several Orquas. So let's get into it. Our story begins on the world of Balsus, no relation to the Blood Angels Ball, and everything seems to be going well. However, the farmers then gaze up and see what appears to be a strike of lightning fall to the earth, and everyone is worried. The local constabularies, so as the leaders of the area in which it fell, go to investigate, and they are shortly slain outright, where it turns out this is a primal spacecraft, aka Dark Eldar. From there, the next person in charge after the previous chap was slain was Primary Clerk Antoni. She decides to follow the ancient rites as inscribed by her people to summon the Snakes of Ithaca, mythical defenders that will come and rescue them. Though people are a little worried because the last time this happened was roughly 600 years ago, so yeah, not really sure how this is going to work. However, a month later, recently promoted battle brother Priad of the Iron Snakes arrives. And everyone is happy and ready, and they're like, okay, where's everybody else? And Priad is like, that's it, that's all she wrote, it's just me. And Antoni's like, we're under attack by like Dark Eldar, yeah, is this gonna work? And Priad responds, one battle brother usually suffices. And it's here that we get a lot of really good interactions between Antoni as well as Priad. Priad shows himself as being a space marine, dutiful, honorable, noble, but he's not a dick. He doesn't disregard humans, nor their lives. He's very authoritative because he's a space marine, but it's never in a dickish manner. He's kind of like an understanding parent. And Antoni, I absolutely adore her character. She is a very strong-willed, sassy, but she's not arrogant or stupid in any means. And they have a lot of excellent, wonderful banter going on between the two of them, and it's absolutely a delight to read. An epic example is that Antoni, being a strong woman of duty, wants to accompany Priad during his mission. She doesn't feel right just letting him go off and do everything while she sits there doing nothing. And Priad is like, listen, it's going to be really dangerous, are you okay? And she's like, I am absolutely fine, don't worry about me. And then she encounters a land speeder. You see, the technology level of their world is kind of like late Renaissance era-ish. There's a lot of agriculture, but there's also like a slowly emerging industrial. They have like laser technology and las technology, but it's one of those things that it's attached to Earth, or their Earth rather I should say. The idea of spacecraft is still foreign to them. They know it exists and they have like advanced technologies such as a miniature quote-unquote iron golem or a little robot that does typey nonsense. But it's very much, this is arcane technology that we kinda know how it works but we don't really know how to replicate. We can maintain it, but it's very iffy. It's a classic pre-Imperial world, if you will, which is excellent to see in 40k writing. So when she comes across this land speeder and she looks at it and she's like, it moves without wheels or legs. And then Priad is like, that's because it's an anti-grav skimmer. And they have a little exchange where Priad's like, are you sure you're gonna be alright? You're kind of freaking out over seeing this. If a Dark Elder shows up at UNB, and she's like, no, I'm alright, I'm fine. Did you see? It floats because of skimming technology. And he's like, it's skimmer technology. Exactly as I said, skimmer. And then she manages to hop onto the thing and she's like, look, I'm there, I'm perfectly fine. See, everything is okay. And she has a little carrying case with her. And she's like, I forgot my case. And he's like, don't worry, I will get it. It's just, it's so funny because it's so realistic and it's very refreshing to see a human character not acting super stupid and a space marine not being super dickish. This is just, it's really great. I love it. It's an excellent read, by the way, Brothers of Snake. Go and give it a read. And they're also joined by another character, Princeps, a war dog, which I imagine is a King Corso, because yeah. And then Princeps and Antoni don't have the best relationship. For Antoni is the primary clerk, aka the main administrator, and the Princeps is the dog of the quote-unquote high legislator, a war dog mind you. So very barky, growly, and they don't really have a good relationship because of that. Understandably so. But it turns out that in addition to all the other stuff that the Iron Snakes can do, they are trained with war dogs. Or it could just be a Astartes thingy, one of the two. So Princeps is joined with them, and Antoni is like, do we really need to bring the dog? Priad then responds, in my experience when dealing with the Dark Eldar, dogs are a good thing to have. And so the three of them get together, and they run off. Speeding at incredible high lengths, they manage to track the Dark Eldar, finding several notable destroyed villages. And again, seeing them interacting is really great. There's a time where they enter into a village and they find a shot of a splinter rifle, and Antoni accidentally cuts herself on it. And then Priad is like, okay, what's wrong? Show me. And she doesn't want to be a burden, thinking that, oh no, he's carrying, but in reality, he has to apply a particular medicament so the Dark Eldar don't smell them, because they can smell blood running. It adds this extra layer of iffiness to the Dark Eldar, while showing a Space Marine whilst being caring? Not caring because of an emotional sense, but more because of a practical sense. But again, never in a dickish way, which is pretty good. Yet as they are going across the land speeder, eventually they enter into the quote-unquote operational area of the Dark Eldar. It's at this point where Priad tells Antoni she should head back. Antoni does not wish to, but before they can make a proper decision, they're ambushed by the Dark Eldar. We then get a bunch of engagements between the Dark Eldar as well as the land speeder, with eventually the land speeder crashing. Priad then arming himself and telling Antoni to stay in a ditch, which she does. Though it's really interesting, we don't really get much Space Marine against Dark Eldar action, at least in the first part. It's more so the perspective of Antoni, where she has to sit there and deal with the fact that, oh my god, I'm all alone, and there's this giant Space Marine off killing and I don't know what to do. By the way, she's unarmed because Priad didn't want her having a weapon because it's another unvariable that he couldn't account for, which I get, but also don't really get at the same time. Again, another thing, he's a Space Marine after all, so it makes sense. But basically she has a bunch of black powder bullets with her, so she decides to make an improvised bomb because she wants to have some type of weapon with her. But she's not alone luckily, as Princeps is there with her, much to her chagrin. Eventually she decides to make it back to her town to inform people to try and get some help. During this time, a Dark Eldar appears, and would have cut her sideways, if not for Princeps grabbing him by the throat. At this point, Princeps gets knocked away by the Dark Eldar, which then gets a face full of improvised black powder bomb. From there he's staggered but not dead yet. Princess, dutiful as always, goes for the throat again, at which point Antoni pulls out her combat knife, which is sheathed in the boot, and stabs him in the neck, killing him utterly. Still in shock with being one of the first ever humans other than a Space Marine in the Iron Snakes, Reef Star's system, to kill a Dark Eldar, her joy is short-lived, as it turns out there are 5 other Dark Eldar baying for her blood, amongst other things. Of course, Priad shows up and murks them all because, you know, he's just that badass. It's at this point that after shaking up on each other, they continue towards the Dark Eldar ship, with Priad at the lead. However, the ship's warp core has been breached, meaning that there's a radiation leaking everywhere. So Priad gives Antoni a little shot, which makes her incredibly sick. Fun fact, Antoni hates being sick and is quite upsetty spaghetti at this. It's kind of cute, honestly, because it's like the whole thing of like, I'm sick and I'm making a mess. I'm like this high lady and you're doing this. I'm very upset right now. So she and Princeps take a little seat down, whilst Priad goes forward to take out the rest of the Dark Eldar. She's like, okay, you can leave me here, but I need a weapon. However, Astarte's bunk pistol and combat blade are a bit oversized for a human being, so he hands her the one thing that she can carry. A grenade, which in her hands is basically a bomb. With that, Priad goes off to go and do what he needs to do, and he does such a good job that through some quirk of fate, one of the Dark Eldar would reach Antoni, and he would be carrying an odd box. And what happens next? Well, I think you deserve to hear yourself. Taken from Brothers of the Snake. A figure came out of the dark towards them, drawn by her voice. It wasn't the giant. The primal was limping, blood streaming from a puncture in its glossy black thigh armor. It was laboring with a heavy casket, an open strongbox that it needed both hands to support. When it saw her, it dropped the casket into the ash on the ground. The casket rocked over as it landed, and spilled out its contents. Antoni simply stared at what had slid out into the soft white powder. It was a jawbone, a huge, stained jawbone, caked brown in an Idaho smoke sheen. It reminded her at once of the jawbone she had dug out of the burned soil at Peros. But this was much bigger. It had belonged to a giant. Not a giant like the Iron Snake, but a real giant. A monster. The teeth, those which remained in their rotting peg holes, were broad and flat, like chisel blades, broken and discolored. Pieces of rusted metal plate were screwed into one side of the jaw around the hinge. Antoni looked up, slowly from the strange treasure, and met the piercing, malevolent gaze of the primal. It leered at her, hungry, excited. Perhaps it saw a chance here, a hostage, a bartering piece for its own miserable life. "What is that?" she asked.
What is that?
It replied, echoing her sounds without understanding them. Its voice was like a knife on a whetstone. It took a limping step forward.
What is that?
It giggled. With its right hand, it slid a hooked blade from a sheath at its waist. "No closer, you hear?" she called out. She tried to stand. It said something back at her in its own tongue. Something brittle and sharp. "Damn you, no closer, I said!" she cried. Princeps had sunk low, growling, his back ridged. She got up, intending to show the fiend her weapon, but the grenade tumbled out of her weak hands and landed in front of her with a thump. The primal raised its eyebrows as it saw what lay on the ground. It cocked its head, like a dog. Antoni dived for the grenade, and the primal did too. She got there first, but it smashed into her, scrabbling. She could smell the animal stink of it, the body heat, the strange, musky scent of its alien flesh. It was fast and vicious, and dreadfully strong. Its armor was like silk, impossible to grab. It punched her hard, and she cried out as she felt a rib snap. The primal grabbed her by the hair, wrenched her head back, and raised its hook blade to slice her throat open. Princeps' powerful bite closed around the wrist, and the primal yelled. Princeps was making a fluid throat noise, a growl rattle, his mouth full, his jaws vising. The primal kicked at him, pulling hard on Antoni's hair, drawing her round. She shrieked as her broken rib twisted and ground. The pain made her lose all control. She threw up again, a violent spatter of acid bile right in the primal's face. The primal let her go, spitting and cursing. Antoni rolled clear. The primal kicked Princeps off and got up, wiping his face. Antoni ended face up down in the ash. She realized she had the grenade in her hand. She got up, holding the grenade out in her left fist, her fingers clenched around its heavy form. "Get back!" she warned the creature. It spat again, wiping flecks of bile off its alabaster cheek. "No closer!" she cried again, brandishing the grenade, squeezing it tightly. There was a tiny click. Antoni realized that she had squeezed the trigger. The primal heard the click too. Its eyes went very wide. She hurled the grenade right at it, even though it was standing in front of her. The primal dodged, cat-like, and the grenade sailed past its left shoulder and landed in the open casket behind it. Antoni began to turn and dive. The world unfolded. Like a booming flower, light hit her like a solid wall and carried her far away. She came to. The blast had thrown her several meters, and the back of her clothes was scorched. There was a wretched smell of physaline and burned flesh in the air. Smoke gusted around her. She rolled over. Princeps licked her face. "Stop that," she wheezed, her throat seared by the heat. Princeps nuzzled her instead. She could smell the wet dog smell of the High Legislator's apartments and singed fur. "Are you alright?" she asked the dog, sitting up and suddenly feeling stupid that she'd asked the animal a question. Patches of his coat were burned, but Princeps was intact. So was she. She got up. The primal lay on the ground, mangled and torn. It had lost the better part of both legs and one arm. Fused bones protruded from the shattered armor, and blistered, tattered meat. The white ash around was stained almost black with its blood. Weakly, it raised its narrow, lean head and looked at her. Its white flesh was spattered with crimson blood. One of its leering eyes had burst. It looked around, its head unsteady, and saw the casket. Nothing remained of the box itself, just a wide, smoldering crater in the ground, where the ash of the forest inferno had been blown back to expose a bowl of seared, raw earth. The jawbone had also been destroyed. All that remained were a few of the chiseled teeth littered on the ground, steaming. The primal began to laugh. It was a screeching, baying sound, broken by choking rattles as blood filled its throat. "What are you laughing at?" she demanded. "What?" It didn't answer. It just continued to laugh, the sound echoing up into the darkness of the dead valley. It was still laughing when the giant reappeared and silenced it with a shot to the head. Whilst in the end Antoni had now doubled her already oppressive Dark Eldar kill tally, most notably, Priad never got a full look at what exactly was in the box. This would prove the beginning of a very long tale that would conclude only many decades later. After this, Antoni would be interred into a hospital and slowly begin to recover. Priad would then say his goodbyes and then leave to his next mission, with a recovering Antoni and a doting Princeps, waiting if ever he should return. But hopefully not. And from here, Squad Damocles would continue. They would continue fighting off threats to the Reef Stars, including Chaos Cultists, which unfortunately would result in the death of Squad Damocles' Sergeant. Priad then being promoted to that rank, inheriting the Relic Lightning Claw of the squad, which may or may not have been the same one that Captain Damocles used way back when in the Heresy. It's speculated but never confirmed. The Iron Snakes would then next be deployed to the world of Idolon. The world had been taken over by a Dark Eldar force in one night, and 300,000 guardsmen of the Brodian Stormtroops, not Stormtroopers mind you, but it's just an Imperial Regiment name, had been trying to take it back from them for a while. The problem is, Dark Eldar are very good at hit and run nonsense, and when you consider city fighting in a built up area with normal humans, yeah, the guardsmen were not having a good time. Thus, Captain Forwar would be deployed with Riberian Petrock. Yet, everything doesn't seem well with Petrock. Using his inclinations of the warp, he's able to gaze that something is wrong. And where it's wrong happens to be right where Squad Damocles is. Squad Damocles is given a unglorious position. They're essentially mop-up forces. If any of the retreating Eldar from the main force manage to slip past the nets, they're there to make sure to gun them down and introduce them to the mercy of the God Emperor of all mankind. Yet as they are safeguarding the eastern wall of the city, Damocles gets attacked by significantly more foes. Whereas they were supposed to be the force to see the least action, they ended up being the force seeing the most action. And there's a lot of great interactions here and the combat is solid. It's here that you really get to see a tactical squad of the Iron Snakes work. And again, their combat power is quite impressive. But even then, they're forced into a defensive position. That is, however, until Petrock shows up. Initially, Damocles' plan was to blow open a hole in the wall with a plasma gun, allowing them an area of advance. Because why defend when you can attack? Though it turns out the wall was sturdier than they thought. Petrock then implies that Damocles had the right idea, but if we don't succeed at first, try and try again. A few more shots at the plasma cannon later, and the hole is open. It's that point that Petrock together with Squad Damocles begin charging forward, and we get some excellent combat. So excellent in fact, I'm gonna let y'all hear it for yourselves. Taken from Brothers of the Snake. They pushed deeper. Pindor found himself a wide, featureless vault, where enemy assassins leapt out from the shadows. He slew them all with his bolter and knife, in a frenzied combat that lasted 5 or 6 seconds, but which he would remember all his life. Xander, Kulz, and Skillion drove forward into Emushin's bunker and butchered 40 Dark Eldar in a straight fight. Kul's spent bolter was glowing white hot as he used it to cudgel an assailant before throwing it aside and laying in with his blade. Natus, despite his wounds, kept a position outside with his bolter held in his remaining hand, picking off the Dark Eldar as they ran one by one. Menims half-carried Ilias forward, and the two of them laid down a crossfire that slaughtered the Eldar things in a haze of thermite smoke and blood. Priad was with Petrok, advancing into the depths of the eastern fortifications. The sergeant's lightning claw, eager for victims, smoked Dark Eldar into smoldering pieces as they advanced. His bolter rattled out its own funeral beat. Primals exploded all around him, fell back and fell down, weeping bloody matter onto the tiled floor. Petrok's power sword scythed through stone and brick, and armor and flesh, and left the sliced remains of the enemy as smoking meat debris behind him. He sung the hunting song of the Acathians as he fought. It was the old lay, and the custom verse of the Wyme hunters as they rode out to find their prey. Priad found himself joining in, singing along the great hero, rejoicing in the slaughter and the blood fog. At last, Petrok bowed forward, sinking over, his bloodied sword set with its tip on the idol city stone. He sighed. "Master Petrok?" Priad asked, blasting out the last of the scum who flickered and reared out of the stone shadows about them. "Thorber has taken the wall. Idolon city is ours. The snakes have won the place." Priad faltered. "Then why do you look so pale, master? Why so anguished?" Petrok rose again, wiping blood from his cheek and raising the mighty power sword so that it sang in the air above his head. "Because they are coming. The Dark Ones are coming. Fleeing in bloody panic. They move this way, abandoning the west of the city. Can Damocles handle a real fight?" "On my oath they can," Priad snarled. 40 seconds later, Damocles' squad got to prove that boast. Shrieking and fleeing from the city breach, the vast forces of the Dark Eldar retreated east and met the lone warriors of Damocles' squad. The Eldar were frenzied and keening, their senses of self-preservation entirely subsumed by their overwhelming need to escape. They gave no quarter, no sign of surrender or submission. They came as a black armored torrent of thick, spiked evil that rushed out of the city like rats from a fire or water through a shattered dam. Overwhelmed, Priad killed and killed again and went over in the tide of barbed fiends until Petrok hauled him up by the collar and set him back on his feet. Side by side, Petrok and Priad, with blade and claw, leveled the Eldar into a pile 20 deep. Blood was clogging the corridors now. Rich, ruddy, stinking. Behind the Eldar, the warriors of Damocles' squad closed the trap. Andromak was beside his commanders, lancing his plasma beams into the choked confines, slaughtering dozens of the foe as they charged and panicked. Now Xander, his bolter coughing, now Caliges and Pindor smashing with their blades, Ilias his face half gone, his weapon punching into the dark. Skillions, Memmes, Kul, a slaughterhouse, a killing field. 10 iron snakes damming the tide of the Dark Eldar, and fallen Nitus outside, singing the lay, shooting down each and every straggler who got past the deadly blockade. Priad was washed with blood, his bolter was dry firing, as Priok steadied him. "It is done, Priad. We have slain 1,000 over and again." Priad pulled off his helmet and cast it to the ground. It floated away a few yards on a stream of enemy blood that gurgled down the hallway. The air was too close, full of smoke and blood vapor. They had expended virtually all their ammunition and most of their physical strength, but they had killed infamous numbers. But for the evidence of the bodies around them, the scale of their victory was unimaginable. "This day will be remembered by Damocles," Priad whispered in the dampness of the dark. He began a small prayer of thanks to the Emperor. "There is something else," Petrok replied curtly, moving ahead. "We're not done." Despite an absolutely insane victory against the Dark Eldar, Petrok would be right. The grace of the God Emperor leading him to the true Dark Eldar's plan. They realized that against the guardsmen they could hold out, but with hundreds of space marines barreling down towards them, they could not hope to survive, so they didn't plan to. The Dark Eldar had rigged massive amounts of explosives to the phosphor vents of Idolon. Idolon's primary trade value was in its phosphor vents. It was able to produce incredibly highly concentrated and potent phosphor, a very useful chemical in anything from mining to science to explosions. Thus, these vents were rigged to blow with several explosive charges. The Dark Eldar planned to sell their lives before detonating and taking not only the Hive city, but hundreds of space marines and tens of thousands of Imperial guardsmen with them, irreparably damaging the Iron Snakes, as well as the guards of the Reef Star system. Or once they would lose the battle, they would win the war. Quite long-term planning for the notoriously short-themed Eldar, but that's because the Archon of this particular Cabal had a plan decades already in the making. Unfortunately for him, Squad Damocles would find the charges. Being unable to deactivate them, they were able to move them out of the city and have them detonate harmlessly. And whilst Captain Pounder was a little upsetty spaghetti with his librarian going off and doing whatever he wanted, he couldn't deny that Squad Damocles had truly earned its place amongst the great annals of the Iron Snakes. Yet the Iron Snake's journey would not end here, and Squad Damocles would only continue in its glory. Following more exploits dealing with chaos, renegades, demons possessing battle brothers, as well as trials and an incredibly awesome duel which involved a demon getting burnt in a flame as the conclusion, we come to the final part of the book. And lo and behold, here all the stories begin to tie up quite nicely, and we get to see the true and real goal of the Dark Eldar, and it is as insidious as it is genius. It's a lovely day in the Reef Stars and everything seems to be hunky-dory. That is, however, until a giant orc war assaults the Reef Stars, and everything is going to shit. Thus, the initial response is a wave of 250 Space Marines, 25 full squads, led by the Chapter Master himself, Sedion. However, Squad Damocles, one of the notables, is not part of that, because Priad refuses to deem them battle ready after learning that his brothers had done a quote-unquote forbidden test, which is essentially free diving into a deep ocean trench. Homie got a little upset spaghetti that his boys took a little skinny dip in some dark water. Now it means more to the chapter and all that, but it's really unnecessary, and this is very much so a you need to learn your lesson type moment. Thus Priad sentenced Damocles to a punishment of hard training, which is said to last a month. And everyone, it seems pretty chill. Yeah, an orc war is bad, but everything should be fine. Not to mention the chapter master is leading a full quarter of the company to go and deal with them, so everything should be fine, right? Keyword, should be. It would in fact not be fine. For Petrock, this guy has saved the Iron Snakes at least on 3 separate occasions now, begins to be having visions and dreams, and he realizes that Sedion is in a hell of a big trouble. Thus he began organizing a rescue squad, with Damocles at his head, also composing of roughly a quarter of the chapter. Thus, together they travel to the world in which Sedion had been deployed, the world of Ganhendanarak. This was the largest concentration of orcs, so classic Space Marine stuff, take out the warboss and have the boys fight amongst each other and then bugger off somewhere else. However, it was at this point that it turns out that Sedion didn't really understand what was going on. This was not just one orc war, but rather, it was multiple, for it turns out he had accidentally walked right into the jaws of an orc civil war. Being surrounded and cut off, he begins taking grievous losses, and it would appear that the chapter master may meet his end on this day. That is, however, until the relief force launches a surprise attack. Catching the orcs off by guard with more of them armored beakies, they managed to buy enough time for the chapter master to rally and break out of the encirclement, before the group as a whole began to pull out. However, with the ensuing battle and everything that occurred, many battle brothers were outright slain. It's unknown how many exactly, but it's believed that roughly of the forces that sent out, approximately half were left, meaning that, worst case scenario, over 200 battle brothers could have been slain. A very bad day for the Iron Snakes, but it could have been much worse. Though how much worse is up for debate. As in the chapter command, said debate occurs. And basically there are 2 camps. One claims that the war is too massively divisive. One claims that the war is too massive to be defeated in open battle, and thus to retreat off the world and conduct a campaign of containment, slowly whittling away at them, decapitation strikes, logistics things, breaking them apart, slowly destroying them outright. The other camp is the exact opposite, saying that the honor of the chapter and their fallen brothers demands that they destroy the orcs. Not to mention, if the war is so massive, with their depleted chapter now, they can't contain it, and thus it's a recipe for disaster, so they have to crush the orcs or die trying. Petrock and Priad, on the other hand, have been having odd dreams. Priad dreaming of a set of jaws and a black dog. The two of them then discuss this and realize that something is up. Thus Petroc, with him being quote-unquote the master, a very high-ranking, if not the chief librarian, manages to convince Sadon to hold his decision in absence for at least 1 week, whilst these two begin investigating their dreams, trying to find out what the hell is up. It's at this point that they begin delving into the realm of the warp and mind. And a little bit of fucky-wucky happens here. It's unknown exactly how much time passes. It's one of those things that's not really explained well, and with this there are two explanations. Either it's a case of the warp being the warp and turning years into decades, or it's a case of a space marine just being absent from the concept of time because he's a space marine. But basically what ends up happening is that they realize that, hey, that dog is Princeps, and that jawbone way back when is from the first thing of Balsolok. Petroc is like, okay, we need the jawbone, that's what this is about. But then Priad is like, I can't really do that, the jawbone is exploded, all that was left were a few teeth. For it turns out, Antoni had managed to take a few of the teeth as a souvenir, a memento of her multiple near-death experience and severe sickness. Antoni hated being sick, by the way. Petroc, however, is stuck in the dream world because of warp-time shenaniganery, which may or may not have something to do with the Dark Eldar. It's not really heavily explained, but wouldn't surprise me in the least. And he, together with Squad Damocles, as well as some reinforcements of the chapter, head over to Balsolok. And it's there when he reunites with Antoni, he is shocked as she's an old woman at this point. And what he thinks has been only 12 years turns out to be decades. Again, it could just be a space marine not really understanding time, or it could be warp shenaniganery. And when I say a space marine not understanding time, I don't mean that he doesn't understand it, it's just that their lives are so long and duties everything, it just kind of blurs together, but you know, either one is plausible. But he then explains that they need to find the teeth to Antoni. It's at this point that he then reveals what Petroc had learned. Petroc in his dreams had learned that this was all a ploy by the Dark Eldar. The Dark Eldar are manipulating the Orc Wars by stealing a relic. This is a jawbone from a revered Orc warboss. It is very important to them, and the Dark Eldar were meant to use it to deposit it into the Reef Stars, using the Orcs as a sledgehammer to all but annihilate the Iron Snakes, leaving them ripe to do the pickings on the civilian worlds. For again, it turns out that the Orcs are not here for the Reef Stars, nor are they here for the Space Marines. They believe that each of the other Orc wars has stolen the relic, and thus they're fighting each other to claim it. Again, more machinations by the Dark Eldar. And it turns out that ever since that day way back when on Balsolok, Priad has been unintentionally foiling the Dark Eldar or making their plan far more difficult, thus dragging it out by decades. It is at this point that Antoni, now the High Legislator by the way, essentially ruler of the planet, then takes them down into the catacombs, where the teeth are held in a lockbox, again treated as a memento of the time in which the High Legislator fought with the Snake of Ithaca. And again, we get a lot of excellent banter here, and it's really great. There's another dog that kind of looks like Princeps, though not actually Princeps, because Princeps sadly died, because, you know, understandable. Dogs do not live for decades, or only if they could. But there's a lot of great banter, and it's funny, and it's really great. And Tony is like sassy as well. It's just, the dialogue here is really great. But I'm gonna waffle on if I carry on. I just really like this book, guys. But it turns out that Petroc was right on the money, for Priad is soon ambushed by Dark Eldar. Priad had initially gone alone, not wanting to draw any attention, but it turns out the Dark Eldar were waiting for this point, and begin protecting the so-called relic. With Priad having to duel the Dark Eldar Arkham and probably the architect of this whole machination himself. However, it is at this time that the rest of the squad sense the firing and begin deploying. And the final chapter between the Iron Snakes and this unnamed Dark Eldar Cabal begin. But as per usual, instead of me carrying on and on and on, let's hear it straight from the horse's mouth, taken from Brothers of the Snake. The third section of Damocles had penetrated the south wing of the palace. Andromach's flame had scoured the marble chambers and undercroft stairs. At his flank, Pindor and Natus picked off the stragglers. "For Ithaca!" Andromach shouted as he gusted fire along the stone hallways. "And for Priad," Natus suggested. "That's right," said Pindor. "For Priad, our heart and soul." "Sections!" Andromach called. "Has anyone made contact with Brother Sergeant yet?" "Negative!" Xander replied, his voice distorted over the link. "Heavy fighting here!" "And here," Charon's voice cut in. "No trace of Priad's whereabouts yet." "If he's dead," Pindor began. "If he's dead, what?" asked Andromach. "If he's dead, These Xeno scum will pay. Natus laughed. How can they be made to pay more than they're already paying now? I'll find a way, said Pindor. Autolycus clunked into the main courtyard of the palace. Through his ancient, cracked ocular senses, he read the heat lifting from the human bodies that littered the yard. Beyond that haze, he detected the warm shadows lying in wait.
Show yourselves then,
he boomed, his voice resounding off the high walls on every side. Nothing stirred.
if that's the way you want it.
He growled.
Coming, ready or not.
The weapon mounted on either side of his bulky torso cycled up into place, and he let rip with his last cannon and storm bolter. Whole sections of wall exploded and collapsed, bringing stone facings down like an avalanche. The hidden enemy discovered what slaughter meant. Autolycus stomped over to a dying primal, sprawled in a lake of blood at the side of the main steps.
Where's Priad?
He asked. The primal gargled some obscenity. Autolycus lowered his storm bolter.
Wrong answer,
he remarked. Priad fell, pain flaring through his skull. His visor went blank. Scrolling only the malfunctioned symbol, he heard the primal lord crowing in triumph. He tore off his ruined helmet and hurled it at his foe, forcing the primal lord to backstep and deflect the flying helmet with his spear. As it left his hand, Priad saw how deeply his helmet had been damaged. The side of the helm was folded in and crushed. It had only barely spared him from the primal lord's blow. He half rose, the rain streaming off his bare face, but the primal assaulted him again and knocked him back. Priad swung his lightning claw and made the primal lord jump aside. He regained his feet, then staggered as the renewed blows of the dark foe drove him back against the prow of the nearest raider craft. He summoned his willpower and put the strength of his back into one devastating blow of his gauntlet weapon. The primal lord parried the stroke with the blade of his spear and rammed Priad backwards, skewering the lightning claw against the raider's elegant prow. Pinned and helpless, the claw flickered with discharge, blades moving uselessly. The primal lord kept the claw pinned hard with his spear, one-handed. As he drew out a bite dagger to finish Priad off, the twin blade rose up. In the final second, Priad remembered his benediction. He was still envenomed from that lucky omen on Celadus Isthmus. He was a striking snake. He tensed the Betcher's glands in his hard palate, where the green-back viper's toxins had been contained, and spat into the primal lord's eyes. The primal screamed and fell back, clawing at his mask. Priad tore away the Dark Elder's spear staking his left hand, and holstered it up in his crippled fists. It felt remarkably light, as if it was barely there. Ithaca! He grunted as he drove all his weight behind the blow. The primal lord's magnificent helm bounced off the rain-swept flagstones, and his beautifully armored body toppled slowly onto its side, blood jetting from the neck stump and splashing onto the yard, where it was diluted by the downpour. Priad sank to his knees and cast the odious spear aside. He heard a slow, heavy tread approaching him.
Done?
Asked Autolycus, towering over him, a grim monolith in the dismal rain. I think so. Is Damocles here?
Purging the palace as we speak. They are fine men, Priad. You should be proud of them.
You presume I'm not?
I'm certain you are. Notables. What glory to be called by that name. I was a notable once.
You still are, Autolycus, Priad said.
Thank you, but I was. I truly was. Scipio was my squad. Notable Scipio. How well we wore that title. Ah, me. Happy days.
Priad shook his head and laughed. He tried to rise. Autolycus extended his cannon mount for Priad to brace against.
Look to your wounds, lad, or you'll end up in a combat chassis like me.
Autolycus said. There are worse places to be, said Priad.
Are we finished here?
Asked the ancient dreadnought. I think we are.
Was it worth it? Was Betrock right?
Priad nodded. It took 10 years. 10 years. by whatever measure of time a man cares to employ, for the consequences of the second Balsolic undertaking to have any lasting effect. Using the dark and calcified teeth, which High Lister and Tony had finally discovered, 2 days after the end of hostilities in the bowels of the treasury, locked in a small casket labeled Other, the apothecaries and fleshsmiths of the factory fashioned a copy of the relic. They crafted it from inert organic matter, lacing the artificial bone with the genetic codes extracted from the original teeth. This work, though ingenious, was a simple extension of the genetic applications they had mastered to the ritual creation of altered humans. The relic was grown in a vat, fed with minerals, its shape solely defined by the template writ within each teeth. Later it was conveyed into disputed territory and displayed during a number of conflicts so that the greenskins could identify it. Several worthy squaws of the factory undertook these dangerous actions. They on Bathus, Mains on Triumvirate, Thebes on Calcon. Twice, Damocles carried the relic into war to goad the orcs. Once the lure was set, the factory's librarius, working under Petrock's instruction, and aided by the mass astropaths of 28 worlds, reinforced the ploy, saturating the greenskin horde with psychic propaganda, stirring their loyalties and their hungers, forcing them to turn and seek the holy relic. A final mission, conducted by the reconstituted Parthis squad, who won the honor after drawing lots, carried the relic far outside the Reefstar territory, and secured it on one of the Primal's own raid worlds. 8 months later, the Swankin host ascended onto that world, and reclaimed their trophy. The Primals had suffered a terrible fate at their hands, ultimate victims of their own deceit. By that time, the inexorable Orc Muster had turned away from the Reef Stars, drawn off by the ruse. The Green Host had receded into the darkness of the outer systems, chasing the recovered relic, and making war with their own kind to claim its ownership. The Greenskins did not return to the Reef Stars for 1,000 years. The Primals did, but the factory was always there to greet them. And with that, this Dark Eldar Cabal had been forever damaged, with its Archon dead, as well as its bases utterly destroyed by a ravaging Orc horde. It would prove no more issue to the worlds of the Reef Stars, though others would try their hand, yet the Snakes of Ithaca would always be waiting. I really love this story. Brothers of the Snake is an excellent book. I love that it's broken up into different parts. It's all one contained story, but you can individually digest them, and it's so great. Also, the whole interactions between all of them are great, and Tony is a fantastic character. The way she talks to the Dreadnought is so funny, and the individual camaraderie between brothers is great. I can't recommend this book enough. But in the end, one singular Space Marine did indeed suffice, for Priad not only stopped the Dark Eldar nonsense on the world of Balsus way back when, he would continue to be a thorn in their side, and unknowingly, mind you, he would end up catastrophing their entire plans, saving the Reef Stars, and his chapter in the process. Though he didn't do it alone, but he was a hell of an instrument. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how one single Space Marine managed to capsize the plans of decades of a Dark Eldar Cabal. I highly recommend Brothers of the Snake. Excellent book, go give it a read. But just one or two things to touch upon before we end off this video. As to how many Dark Eldar the whole Iron Snakes killed, it's unknown. I mean, in one of the excerpts it says they killed 1,000 with 10 dudes, so 100 Dark Eldar for one Space Marine is a lot. When you imagine Vulcan got that same KDA with smithing hammers, it's a lot, so take it with a little grain of salt, but as I said before, tens or dozens of Dark Eldar for one Space Marine makes sense to me. Also, it's said that Priad, when he was on Balsolok in the first undertaking, killed quote-unquote a clan team's worth. However many that is, I don't know. But I guess it's probably like maybe 2 squads, say 40 Dark Eldar, kind of fits in with the numbers. It's unknown, but yeah, the Iron Snakes are pretty good and these Dark Eldar are kind of shit. Though, I do like how the Archon really gave him a run for his money, and I also love how he used the Betches glands. I really do love this about this book, that these are still Space Marines, but they're logical and smart. It's really well written. I'm gonna sound like a broken record. Last thing I'll mention, the fucking Dreadnought playing hide and seek with the Dark Eldar, one of my favorite moments in all of fucking 40k. It's so good. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below, what do you guys think about today's video? What do you guys think about the Iron Snakes? And would you like to see more of them? I want there to be another book. I wouldn't mind there being a trilogy, kind of like what we got with the Kakaradans or the Night Lords. It's just such a cool chapter. I want to see them in a shield wall. That's so sick, man. I love the Iron Stakes, one of my favorite chapters ever. But yeah, I want to say massive thank you guys for watching, being more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. Shout out to my Lieutenant GM members, Miss Eddie 3 Miss Majora of the Void. Shout out to my Sergeant GM members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Warsmith Fireheart, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Bowen, Mr. Sean R07, Mr. Matthew Merrill, Mr. Sergeant Cossack 68W173D, and Mr. That Guy. Shout out to my Corporal GM members, Tremel the Math Kitty, Lord Rosarius, Tech Priest Toaster, Mr. Bowen, Shauna Smithers, Gentle Salamander, The Witch of Warhammer, Major Doshinet, Edward King, and Mr. Overanalyze This. Finally, but certainly not least, shout out to my priority members, Mr. Thomas Oslons, Mr. Ivan_SPW, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Ayeda, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. Fortis Unum, Mr. CMDNA, Mr. Eric Massaro, Mr. Dom Marek, Mr. Ken_Sakura 333, Mr. Adrian Van Vuren, Morally Bankrupt, Matthew Peter, Joshly 1320, Adrax 1, Mr. Ethan Elam, U7L, and Mr. Kiri Khan. Thank you, I love you, I appreciate you guys. Sign up with our memberships, get a bunch of awesome benefits, behind the scenes stuff, early access videos, as well as a whole bunch of awesome benefits. Remember, this will be free, so whether your boy a dollar or not, I love you just the same. Mwah! But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, amazing people. Thank you so very much for watching. I'm sure to say Lord there, boys and girls. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss Rangers. I love the Iron Snakes because they're a technically Codex Divergent chapter, but not super Codex Divergent. I'm such a slut for things like that. You have no idea. I'm gonna get to share the video. Okay, bye.